What's good, y'all? We here with another video from the range. This one will be about shucky face. But yeah, this one is about hold on. This is annoying. Dead ass annoying. About the black community and what the government has done to it with the fatherless homes and all the other good stuff. Well, it ain't good, you know what I mean.
Have left home in order for their children to get meat and bread. There are so many dehumanizing elements in the welfare system that we are concerned about removing. Ultimately, we are concerned about a guaranteed annual income. And the other thing I think it is very necessary to say is that everybody's on welfare in this country. And when it comes to black people and poor people, we just call it something else. When it's for white people and rich, we call it subsidies.
It's no secret, fatherless households are more common in the black community. A survey from the American Consensus Institution revealed that 67% of black children under 18 in the US live in homes without fathers. This is a stark contrast to white children, as only 24% of them live in fatherless homes. But it wasn't always like that. The black families survived generations of open racism, widespread poverty, and slavery. They lived through segregation and violence, and strong family bonds used to be the norm.
As of 1960, 2/3 of all black American children were living with both parents. That declined over the years until only 1/3 were living with both parents in 1990.
See what I be telling y'all? Since okay, check this out. Think about when the Negro League was lit. That was the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Bro, when the 60s and 70s came, they was like, nah, that black unity shit. Nah, we ain't for that. I'm talking about the time we had communities. The Negro League was pretty much our source of income as a community, as a culture. They only allow black people to play. So where the money was going, it was always being recycled with us, which kept money in our pockets, which kept us with jobs. Think about how many people was at the concession stands during that time selling food or, even doing the little preps before the game, a little shit like that. But it just kept jobs and it kept us out of trouble because we was always together. Wasn't no beefing because we didn't see them and we didn't see them. Man, just keep watching. This gonna get into this.
So it's not the legacy of slavery that destroys the African American family.
Ooh, I hate that. I hate when people do that because when I was taking my psychology classes, they made me write an essay and they let me choose on what I want to write about. And I wrote about this. People think slavery was the issue and why we so separated. I did the math. I think it was like from the end of slavery to I think it was like maybe 18 something. I can't remember the exact right now because it's early. But anyway, I think it wasn't even like 80 years in between. So I'm like, how in the hell did we gain information, knowledge, get a chance to learn anything between 80 years? That's that's not even we're not even allowing the people to get old in the community and teach anything within 80 years. What you got a 40 or 50-year-old trying to teach you something that don't know nothing? Because we just got out of slavery? Come on now, make that shit make sense. The reason that we so separated right now in the culture is the government, and it's our government. Like we didn't come up with the issues; they gave us the issue, and we took it.
Between 1890 and 1950, the marriage rate was much higher among black women than white women. A fraction of black children lived in homes without.
Another thing, God, they're gonna be tired of me pausing it. I said that in my last one. Well, no white women being married. We had the community. They was still trying to figure it out because they had no community during slavery. There wasn't community. They was using each other, capitalizing off of one another. They didn't like each other. They did not. So, with that being said, the ratio of black women and white women being married, black women were married way more than the white woman. And you can go back and look at it through history. The happiness, the collectiveness, all that shit. within the black community within the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. 70s and 80s where it started to get tricky. But
their fathers. But everything changed with the expansion of the welfare state. It divided the household and created a dependency on welfare. This kind of reminds me of what President Reagan said.
I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
So, what
hot
happened?
damn,
What's the
that is it, boy. He said it, boy, because he the nigga who dropped the crack. Like, come on, bro. Who? He said, he the president said we here to help. Same people who drop crack. Same people who incarcerate, same people who come up with the rules and the laws and all the other bullshit to keep us at a disadvantage. Fuck that.
mechanism? Here is a detailed look at how the welfare state played a role in the dissolving of the family structure over the years. People say that the breakdown of traditional family units, family structures, is a byproduct of black poverty, not just because there is no man to support the family financially, but also because women tend to earn less than men on average. Of course, the connection between the two is there, but it goes deeper than that. Welfare was a mean little business. It was designed to get people by in a pinch. Public assistance programs, like welfare entitlements, have been a part of American culture since the 1940s. Unfortunately, like in many other aspects of government institutions, Black Americans were left out. In time, Black people could also get financial support, but it wasn't easy. Mothers who applied for checks had to let
I ain't gonna say nothing, but I'm gonna say something. Y'all seen the video. Y'all seen what kind of people was in the video talking about in the 40s who needed assistance. Because what we doing in the 40s, in the 50s, go look up your history. Because they like to stop history for us. Like, when it comes to America, they like to stop the social history in the 80s with the crack. And the American history, they like to stop in the 1800s. Like, the shit in the Spanish Inquisition doesn't affect fucking America.
social workers inspect their homes to see if their conditions were suitable for welfare. These workers also had to make sure no man was living in the house. But even if they qualified for support, the amount they received was meager and not enough to build a stable life. In the early 1960s, welfare was not yet common, even in the most impoverished Black communities. In the decade that followed, the number of Black people on welfare went up by 169%. They further
That
increased
shit
by
is
30%.
wild. That's wild. Oh, they gonna forget about the war that we had in between time, but that ain't they gonna leave it out. I'm gonna break it up. We had wars in between these time where Black families were being torn apart because they was enlisting our asses, going to war and dying and shit, and not being able to come back and feed our families. So of course it's gonna go up. Cause guess what? Ain't no man in the house no more. Nigga dead. He either dead or disabled. And if he disabled, which he still ain't in the house because they got him on disabled. That's a whole nother story.
From 1970 to 1975. In 1972, New York City, almost 1 out of every 6 residents was on welfare. A major portion of these households were Black. Although Black people were only around a tenth of
30
all
years,
Americans,
bro.
they made up almost 50% of all welfare recipients by the late 70s. A recent UNICEF report showed that many
From the
children
40s
under
to the
18
70s,
in
30
America
fucking years.
struggle financially. And African American children
That
are
shows
nearly 4
somebody
times
with the
more
war.
likely to be in poverty
18,
than
20
white
year olds
children.
never came
Though
back
the
home.
number of families receiving cash assistance has decreased since 1996, child poverty rates for Black children in the US remain high. This outcome is not by accident. I studied the evolution of social welfare policies in the US,
Me too.
from the New Deal to the 1996 reforms, and found that these policies have been discriminatory from the start. And a lot of
Redlining
people
like
can
a
confess to
motherfucker.
that. This led many Black families to fall into cultural and economic ruin. In a short period, healthy Black people started relying on government assistance to achieve some level of normalcy. But within the city slums,
They shut
that
down the
normalcy was
factories in the
impossible to
70s
get.
and the
Black
60s.
children barely knew their fathers, and most were raised by unemployed and unmarried mothers stuck in a cycle of poverty and modest paychecks.
Cause
This marked a
daddy
significant
dead.
shift in
Daddy
Black American
ain't no
history.
crack
The
yet, so you
consequences
can't
were
blame
severe for the next
drugs.
generation. Let's start with the Social Security Act of 1935. It was introduced during Franklin Roosevelt's administration.
Don't tell
It was designed to create the safety net in the country, safeguarding families from losing their income. It was viewed as a significant part of New Deal reform and paved the way for federal protections in the future, such as the Affordable Care Act and Medicare. This policy had two main parts. The first part had social insurance programs that provided financial support to dependents of deceased or incapacitated workers, and Social Security for retired older
They only
Americans.
started
The
doing it for
second
the
part
white man. They ain't
comprised
started doing that shit
means-tested
for
public
us.
assistance programs, initially known as Aid to Dependent Children, and later renamed Aid to Families with Dependent Children. In 1962, under the Kennedy administration, ideally, it was believed that as the overall quality of life in the country improved, more families could support themselves without needing financial assistance from the ADC program. Eventually, the ADC program would become unnecessary and gradually phase out on its own. But this posed a major problem for Black Americans. Like any other component of the New Deal, the origins of the Social Security Act were deeply rooted in racism. During the 1930s and 1940s, Black people had to deal with widespread racial discrimination in the workplace. They held low-paying jobs, often paid in cash and off the books. This made them ineligible for social insurance programs. The ADC program was an extension of state-run programs that supported.
So if we wasn't getting that assistance, we was still not being paid as much, but we was thriving. Make it make sense. Like, that mean they had to been doing terrible. Terrible.
Widowed mothers, but mostly benefited white widows. The states decided eligibility and need, and since the separate but equal doctrine was in place, blacks were still excluded from fully participating. Jim Crow laws and the separate but equal doctrine led to a system with different services for whites and blacks. But as we all know by now, they were far from equal. States made efforts to cut down ADC enrollment and costs. They proposed residency requirements to prevent blacks from the South from qualifying for the program. In 1935, there was a hearing on a bill, and the NAACP, an organization that fights for civil rights, expressed.
No, we ain't gonna get no praise to them either. We gonna stop the I love to hate nigga groups. We gonna quit that shit. NAACP, quit playing. Who run that group?
Their concerns. Southern politicians wanted to exclude agricultural and domestic workers from the bill. This meant that many black workers couldn't get the support they needed.
No agriculture or no domestic. So that mean to tell me all the crop and share farming niggas is done. You're done. They made a law to where you're done. We're not gonna include you in this. So that's another group of men asked out. Don't forget they did the factory workers. Don't forget about the construction men. Who built all granny houses and who built all these buildings before the so-called immigrant, the Mexican came in and they started do their thing? Who did it?
This exclusion would particularly affect black sharecroppers and cash tenants, who were already struggling to make ends meet. Even though the NAACP was highly against it, the Social Security Act was approved. That's why 65% of African Americans nationwide were not eligible for benefits, and an even larger percentage of these black families in the South were excluded from the program. In the 1950s and 60s, things got even worse for black families.
And let's not forget, damn, I cannot remember I need to bring my notes next time. But it was a bill created around this time with W.B. Du Bois and them, where they created the African American, the colored, the laws where we changed over and started being called these certain things, and they started to create these censuses and stuff to where they would document you and stuff like that. Before then, they weren't doing that. That's why they discarded the agriculture and the domestic, because anybody can grow plants and do domestic work. Anybody, child can do it. But you know.
Welfare checks incentivized single mother households. And there was one rule that ruined it all. The man in the house rule. Black families have long been the victims of income inequality and bad government policies. The irony, of course, is that conservatives pushed black mothers to break their families to get welfare. Before 1968, many states and administrative agencies created and enforced the man in the house rule. This rule basically meant that if there is a working or healthy man in the house, the government can't help you. And they would go as far as to send welfare workers to visit the homes without warning to check if a man was present. If they found any evidence whatsoever, families lost their welfare benefits. Over the years, the welfare state started dissolving the family structure, slowly but surely. A man who can't get a decent job and provide a substantial income suddenly.
Then they bring in the crack. You put the man out the house, take his jobs away, then the government say, we're going to help you. What they do? Gave us crack cocaine and put it in our name. I don't know, it's a shame. We play this dirty game. I don't know, man. This shit's crazy. I'm looking at my
He
notes.
believes that his family is better off without him. So, if a man were to lose his job, he literally had to leave the house so his children could get government surplus peanut butter, beans, and cheese. On the other hand, if either the
Not the
woman or the
cheese.
man, or both, were irresponsible, they faced no consequences for their actions. And it was the taxpayers who ended up paying for it. These things aren't exactly designed to keep the marriage intact. They are meant to divide people. The harm done to the children was massive. Many children experienced the hurt from broken families at such a young age. In 1960, just 33% of Black American children didn't live with two parents, but by 1988, that rate went up to 61%. In that time, the proportion of Black children
1988?
born to single mothers rose from
World War
23%
One
to
had
more
already
than
been over
60%.
with.
This is exactly why we can't judge government policies based on their ideals, but based on their results. And these results,
Two.
well, left a ton of households
wait.
fatherless. I mean, think about it. What would the result have
One,
been
whoa,
if this
after-
welfare policy had required the opposite
After World War One, I think about how many black men we lost. And then they put in all these orders and shit.
of that? That both parents live in the same home and care for their children to receive government assistance. The welfare state did what slavery couldn't do. It broke families apart. And broken families fuel poverty. The structure of the family can influence the choices children make. For example, boys raised without their fathers are more likely to drop out of school, get violence, use drugs, or go to jail. Girls are more likely to have a child out of wedlock or engage in sexual
And that's not because that's something they want to. That comes out of a repetition of habit. What people call hereditary is taught. And the actions that a lot of black men are creating are hereditary because they are taught by the men above them that this is the thing to do when you feel like you've run out of options.
activities at a very early age. These children are also more prone to mental health problems, which can affect them as adults. A psychology test detailed in Roy Baumeister and John Tierney's book, Willpower, showed that children from fatherless households were more likely to settle for a small prize straight away. In contrast, children with fathers present were more willing to wait for a bigger prize. Experts from the Northwestern Institute for Policy Research challenged that these effects are primarily due to dangerous neighborhoods or poor schools. They found that the direct effect of family structure itself played a more significant role.
And the little boy only gonna do that because he see his mama taking welfare. If he had the dad in the house, he'd understand structure and what it means for patience and hard work because he watching his daddy patiently work hard. While his mama get that quick boom every month, boom every month. So yeah, if he offered with a quick boom every month, the child gonna take it too because that's what he see.
As marriage rates declined among the poor and working class in the US, the institution of marriage has remained strong among the wealthier population, with similar rates to those from 50 years ago. At the same time, the decrease in marriage among the working class has led to a significant rise in out-of-wedlock births, often to couples who are living together without being married. This happens because people view marriage as an ideal situation, but feel it is unachievable, yet they still want to have children. In the mid-1980s, the rates of fatherless households dramatically increased. Today, just 44% of Black children live with their fathers.
After World War II.
Also, a lot more Black children are born outside of marriage. The rates of such cases went up from 24.5% in 1964 to 70.7% by 1994, which remains at a similar level today. Many people blame the expansion of welfare programs for the breakdown of Black families. Since 1935, people have had access to cash welfare, but this welfare was quite modest and not enough to cover any of the living expenses. With Johnson's Great Society, which began in 1964, welfare benefits became much more generous and controlled. When I mean controlled, I mean crazy. The man in the house rule discouraged marriage because it provided welfare assistance to mothers if no man was living in the house. If a mother married an employed man,
It was crazy. My grandma stays 3 to 4 miles away from the Johnson's mansion.
even one earning the minimum wage, it jeopardized her
Seen that motherfucker all the time when I was growing up. All the time.
financial support. These benefits were huge. The Great Society programs offered a way out for low-income Black families. This could be why, in 1964, only 7% of American children were born out of wedlock, compared to the current rate of 40%. So basically, the government urged mothers to keep fathers out of the home and paid them well for doing so. Shifts in the labor market and deindustrialization greatly impacted job opportunities, especially for low-skilled workers. It hurt both whites and Black people, but Black communities were the most affected. Here's an example. Imagine a city like Detroit, where the manufacturing industry was the top employer, and many Black men held manufacturing jobs. Here, in the 1970s, 56% of black men were in the manufacturing industry, but by 2000, it dropped to 26%. Over the years, technological advancements and economic shifts created a demand for skilled workers in other sectors, like healthcare or technology. These new jobs required a higher level of education and specialized skills. The problem was the lower level of education among black men on average. As jobs increasingly required education beyond high school, black men faced many challenges. This made it harder.
And that ain't because the workers in employment wanted that shit. The government set that shit up and say, hey, we know how to get these motherfuckers out of our building. They ain't got no education. So what we finna do is put a system of education in. So you motherfuckers gotta be smart. Get the job.
For them to adapt to the changing job market and find new employment in other industries. White men were better equipped to handle the changing job market. They had higher education and a greater chance of securing well-paid jobs in emerging industries. Then there was the 90s gear change.
And no, they didn't. That's nepotism like a motherfucker. How y'all go from being the worst of the worst, like right below us, get above us, and then just shoot through the stuff? Nah, ain't no way in hell. That's why a lot of our shit fucked up. But just imagine a bunch of George Bushes in the 80s and 90s doing jobs because their parents could afford for them to do the job and then not take a toll on the business because you really wasn't doing nothing hard that nobody couldn't train you to do.
In the late 1990s, efforts to reform the AFDC program took on more subtle forms of racism. Critics claimed that the program encouraged out-of-wedlock births, irresponsible fatherhood, and dependency across generations. During this time, there was a lot of public concern about the cost of welfare programs. Some people believed that the programs contributed to rising taxes and national debt. It tapped into public fears and created a seriously negative perception of people who received welfare. There were a lot of misconceptions and stereotypes about those who lived in poverty. So, the reform bill that was eventually passed replaced the AFDC with TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. The new bill imposed stricter work requirements, expecting single mothers to find work within 2 years of receiving benefits. There was also a 5-year limit on receiving benefits. To promote traditional family values, teenage mothers didn't receive benefits. But that was not all. If a father were to fall behind on child support payments, they could face threats of imprisonment. The bill restricted the use of federally funded TANF for certain groups of immigrants. There were also eligibility limitations on Medicaid, food stamps, and supplementary Social Security income, SSI. These measures were just too harsh. They made it difficult for families in need to get proper financial support. Instead of addressing the root of poverty and creating new employment opportunities, it just punished those who already struggled financially. Well, today, modern problems require new solutions. According to Forbes, the economic status of Black Americans is still far behind compared to white people in terms of stock ownership, net worth, income, home ownership, and other metrics. In the United States, Black workers earn about 30% less than white workers. Almost 50% of Black workers are working in retail, food services, healthcare, and accommodation. And a huge chunk of these workers are doing lower paying services.
And it aggravates me that people can pull this shit up and see it about our community. We just gave up on education. Like, that shit don't mean being smart is null and void. Golly. We need to fix the difference in popularity and what's the word I'm looking for? Conduciveness. They need to match up. Being conducive to your environment and to your culture and being popular. They need to put them two together. They need to not have them separate. Because everybody want to do the popular thing. But the more conducive thing, they like, nah, we'd rather do this. It's easy, it's faster. I mean, we get popular, people get to know me, but then at the end of the day, when you like 40, 50 and nobody give a fuck.
Imagine getting paid more than 40% less than white men for doing the exact same job. If you are a Black woman in the US, this is more likely to happen. In 2020, Black women earned around 58% of what white men earned on average. Similar to Latinas and Native women, Black women face a much more significant pay gap compared to all women. This is because they face both racism and sexism in the workplace. Today, the Social Security program is a backbone for many Black families. It protects them through disability, retirement, or death. The program is crucial because African Americans often lack financial resources and have higher disability rates. The program is meant to help those who earn low income get benefits. Those who heavily rely on Social Security are older Black people with lower lifetime earnings and fewer pension benefits. For example, in 2017, 35% of married and 58% of unmarried older Black people received 90% or more of their income from Social Security. Despite its importance, Black Americans still benefit less overall from the program because of the ongoing pay disparities and shorter life expectancies. These factors result in lower lifetime earnings and, in turn, reduce the total benefits received from Social Security. In 2005, President George W. Bush wanted to make some changes and planned to privatize the program, but the NAACP responded with a nationwide campaign called SOS, Save Our Social Security, and partnered with the Congressional Black to keep the program safe. It worked. Social Security is still an important support system for countless families.
Yeah, 'cause they were trying to take away them white people. Like, hell no, Bush, shut your dumb ass up. You think you too finna do something for Black folk? You finna shut down the white community because they need Social Security too. You know how many white people I see when I go to the doctor over the Black people, and I got some good insurance, but anyway. But you still see more of them. But now, if I go to the other one, I do see a lot of Negroes. But at the same time, the point is, you take it from them, it's gonna piss them off. So don't take it from them. It pissed them off, and they didn't get it took, and we get to keep it.
Fortunately, our country has made very few efforts to reduce the disparities in wealth and income between Black and white households. Despite laws against pay discrimination, Black men earn 83 cents and Black women earn 62 cents for every dollar earned by white men. Also, practices like redlining or housing discrimination have made it nearly impossible or much less profitable for Black families to own homes. These structural barriers create fewer opportunities for Black people to accumulate wealth and save for retirement. When the pandemic hit, Social Security became even more critical.
But with all this being said, you really can't complain about none of it because you don't run none of it. And it's kind of unfair that you don't run none of it as a people, but shit, you don't. Get with the program. Figure out how to beat them at their own game. That's the point I done got to as an adult. Stop complaining and beat them at their own game. Figure out how to play the game and play it. You're failing at everything else. We suck at drugs. We suck at war. We suck at organized crime. Can we just do something? Let's all go back to school. Let's all go back to school and try again.
Many Black adults lost jobs, and many small businesses were forced to close. The coronavirus made it very difficult to keep up with mortgage or rental payments. The thing is, today, more Black Americans are more likely to enter a church to go to a funeral than to celebrate a wedding. Fatherless homes, declining marriage rates, and high divorce rates are challenging.
And I about to never go to another motherfucking funeral day in my life. I refuse for that to be my last memory. Like, no, nigga, we visual people. If I see it, I synced it. I can't unsee it. So if I don't go see you, I don't see it. So I'm okay.
The Black community to the core. Imagine as a young child living in poverty with a single mother in a poor and drug-infested neighborhood. Over the years, you would have witnessed how this would impact your chances of success, like finishing high school and getting a good job. Because of this, many Black children are raised with little expectations or a sense of hope. Now, some might argue that it takes a village to raise a kid, but in reality, the urban public housing village is drenched in toxic influences like violence, drugs, and bad role models. And in that village, fatherless boys are left alone to figure out what it takes to be a man. So, where do they look? To one another. And in many cases, they turn to gangs and the streets. Girls' lives, too, are deeply damaged in fatherless households. Without a father figure, young girls can experience psychological and emotional challenges. They can have lower self-esteem and struggle to form healthy relationships with men. Teen pregnancy is a common problem. They can also struggle with economic hardships and poor academic performance. For things to change, we need to acknowledge that the absence of Black men is damaging countless households. To fill this void, it is essential to reunite fathers with their children, but also to teach the younger generation the value.
Fuck your feelings. Let that boy see his daddy. Let that girl see her daddy. All right, I'm gonna say that one for another. I'm gonna say y'all ass whooping, verbal ass whooping for another.
Value of family structures. But this is something that will take time and a lot of effort. All in all, the US welfare system is a clear reflection of its economic policies and the nation's long history of racism. From the very beginning, the policy excluded Black Americans who were already struggling financially. The man in the house rule only made things worse, which greatly impacted Black households. The expansion of welfare led to a decrease in fathers' involvement in raising their children, leaving mothers to struggle alone in jobless poverty. This created a new reality for poor Blacks, where work became optional, fathers were rare, and dysfunction became common. The lack of family loyalty and work ethic led to a new oppositional racial outlook among young Black males who often resorted to crime. Now, years later, the impact of the rule can still be felt. A lot of Black children have grown up without a father, and they can easily go astray. The situation is hard for overworked and exhausted single mothers.
And it don't be they growing up without one, because without mean dead. These niggas just ain't being accountable, and that's another thing the men need to do within our little circle. We need to hold them niggas accountable. And it's gonna be sad, it sucks to say this, but if they won't hold themselves accountable, we gotta step up. We can't leave them children hanging because they parent won't step up. That's just a sacrifice you gotta make. And at times I don't really believe in the word sacrifice, because sacrifice really means you're doing something that you don't want to do for somebody else's benefit. No, it's for everybody's benefit, because that little boy could turn around 5, 6, 7 years from now and rob you because you didn't take out the time to do what you weren't supposed to do with that child if you ran across that kid. Not nobody else. And that could just be, this is an example, that could be for anybody. You just, each one teach one, bro. Sometimes you got to take that L to get that W, two of them, put them together.
The more children they had, the harder it was to get a job. I just want to point out the brutal reality that led to such circumstances. The welfare culture discouraged individual responsibility. It pushed people to make hard choices, which damaged their families and put everyone involved in challenging positions. This is a reality that many now have to live with. If you enjoyed this documentary, please leave a like and subscribe to the
Yeah,
channel.
pretty good.
We aren't just telling stories.
Yeah, you did your thing on this one. I ain't gonna lie, you pointed out some good stuff. Just you left some stuff out that was kind of detailed and important to gain some kind of content or context around what was going on at the time. But yeah, that was a good one. Appreciate y'all for watching. Tap in with me again on the next one. On the next one.